Hello there, welcome back to Nerd.World Films and Part 7 in the Friday the 13th franchise, A New Blood. This, of course, is the 7th film I've done in this series. If you haven't seen the others already and you've just come to this, it's probably linked up in the corner, if I remembered. Before we get started, like, share, subscribe, and get the excitement out of the way. For the Friday the 13th fans out there, this film is the first film where Kane Hodder finally donned the mask and machete and became the Jason Voorhees that I think most people are familiar with. As I've said in previous videos, people forget that he originally wore a burlap sack, that in the first film it was actually Paolo Voorhees, not Jason. Casual fans are not usually aware of this information, and the Jason they're most familiar with is the big hulking zombie that is Kane Hodder's interpretation of the character, which is probably my favourite and I think everyone else's. That said, the Kane Hodder movies were not amongst the most successful financially and not even necessarily the most beloved, but I don't think that really matters. He was awesome as Jason Voorhees, he embodied it, and the man being a stuntman and other things, other than this, was really willing to throw himself into the part, doing things like a fire stunt near the end of this movie, which at the time was pretty much, I think, the longest anyone had ever been set on fire for a movie, which is pretty damn impressive, all things considered. The film is, as I said, is the 7th one in the franchise after the last movie, which a lot of people actually find to be their favourite in the Friday franchise. I don't personally think that Jason Lives is that great. I understand why a lot of people like it. I don't. At least I don't like it as much as I like some of the other films. I know that the people that made that movie made great effort to... They wanted to stop all the cocaine use behind the sets, all the drug abuse and general abuse that would take place behind the scenes of the movie, so they stomped a lot of that out. They also made great effort for character development and trying to make the characters a little bit more identifiable and not just bodies to count. However, my personal interpretation of that movie was that, with the exception probably of the sheriff, a lot of the characters' motivations and behaviors were two-dimensional and kind of stereotypical and cliched for the genre. This film, to me, although not as well written, isn't as good, and the continuity is a little wonky, is a film that's more self-aware of what it's trying to be. It's like many Jason movies. They don't make a lot of effort to explain who and what Jason is. The lore doesn't expand very much, but this film does make an effort to expand the lore, introduce new elements, and stay self-aware. Basically, Jason goes to camp. Jason kills teenagers because they do drugs and have premarital sex. Pretty much that is a Friday the 13th movie. It doesn't usually get more complicated than that. See the previous entries and see some of the upcoming entries, but this movie tries to introduce a new element, which is basically, by this point, obviously Jason is well established as a zombie. The last film, if nothing else, firmly cemented this fact. So you've got a supernatural element within the Friday the 13th movies to begin with, but now they bring in a psychic element, a telekinetic, who's going to be his nemesis for at least the final act of the film. Our final girl, Tina. Now, there isn't really much to say about a lot of the other characters, so we'll kind of gloss over it. And again, as always, I am trying to avoid spoilers, but they won't be completely easy to avoid with this film. But, we'll try. So, this film begins, obviously, with the obligatory "How the fuck is Jason back again?" scene. The early part of the movie is basically Tina as a little girl escaping what is a very bad argument between her parents, and by bad I mean badly written and acted, and her dad slapping her mum about. He's obviously a dick, he's had a few too many to drink, but Tina gets in a boat and goes out, and to his credit, drunk or not, maybe he's an ass, maybe Tina simply misunderstood what was happening, we don't know, but he seemed genuinely concerned for her, not trying to be abusive or dangerous. He was trying to get her to come back in. She's screaming at him that she hates him and she wishes that he was dead, and this was the first time that her psychic powers would manifest, dropping the wooden platform from beneath his feet and dropping the roof down on him, sinking him into the water. Now there is something I should point out. Remember, continuity was kind of wonky with this. If you actually flick back to the last film and look at the exact same sort of setting, and then this film, there were no houses here. Where Jason was sunk into the water at the end of the last movie, there are no fucking houses. There's houses here now. Not really. I mean, it doesn't. Whatever, Friday the 13th, you do you. So, we skip forward many years later. She's dealing with the trauma of this, but her doctor, who is a dick, is really not trying to help her at all, but he's trying to get himself a Nobel Prize or weaponizer or something. He's basically trying to understand the psychic powers. He's less interested in her trauma. In fact, he believes that her trauma is fueling the powers. The angrier she gets, the more upset and distressed, the stronger her powers manifest. He brings her back to her family home, where her dad died, the seat and root of her trauma, convincing her mother that, she's going to be institutionalized forever, we've got to do something, and he's really trying to provoke a reaction out of her. Now he, as I mentioned, did I mention he is a dick? He's a proper first-class dick of a doctor. And her mother is actually pretty caring, but is being misled by this man that she trusts to be a professional with her daughter. She wants her to be a normal kid. Then, because they have a bit of a tiff, Tina runs out onto the dock and she's like apologizing, wishing her dad was still alive, wishing she hadn't killed him, and she blames herself for his death. Now I don't know if she psychically senses a body below the water, and I don't know, maybe as we will discover later, her dad's body was never actually picked up out of the water. Maybe they couldn't find him, who the fuck knows. She thinks that the body she can sense is actually Jason, so she, using her psychic abilities, resurrects Jason and breaks the bonds which were shackling him to the lake bed. He rises up and she passes out due to seeing Jason Voorhees, who doesn't go on to kill her. Maybe he just assumed she was dead, or maybe he wasn't really all there just yet. He was he'd just come back from the dead again. Might take him a little bit of time to wake up. He doesn't kill her. She passes out. She wakes up and she describes to her mum and the doctor, there was something, I can't really describe it, but there was something. It rose out of the water. A man or some shit. And that's it. Whatever. So then we move along. Jason's wandered off into the woods or some shit, and we find car broken down. There's another cliche. I should point out again a little thing to mention with this movie. Unlike the last film, because they tried something different with the last movie, which is respectable, which was to try and create more fleshed out characters. I think they didn't manage it as well as some of the fans think they did, but that is my personal opinion. Disagree with me if you feel like you want to. These characters are not fleshed out. They are stoner guy, bitch woman, horny guy, horny woman, doofus, oblivious guy. They're literally each one just being a different horror movie cliche, and move on, and there you go. So we've got guy and his girlfriend. Car breaks down. He's like, yeah, fuck it, we'll just set up camp here. She's like, no, we've got to get to where we're going. And she eventually has to admit to him, no, look, dude, it's a surprise party. All our friends are waiting now. We've rented a cabin next to the lake that didn't exist in the last movie, but we rented it, maybe built it, and yeah, we're going there. So yay, great. They start walking, and you can see where this goes. Walking through the woods, Camp Crystal Lake, probably not the best or safest place to be. They run into Jason. They get to be his first victims of this movie, and they never make it to his birthday party. Very sad. But the party continues anyway. There's weed, there's alcohol, and there's premarital sex. Of course there is. These characters are much more bland and basic and more simplistic than the ones we got in the previous movies. Skipping back to the house, doofus guy, who is nowhere near as charismatic or as charming or as I think they really intended him to be. No offense to the actor playing him, really none. There's a fly in here and it's driving me insane. It seems to want to just zoom at me. Do you guys remember when you were a kid and flies used to fly the fuck away from you when you wafted at them? I remember that. Now the little bastards come back. Is that some kind of evolution? What the fuck? Anyway, she goes next door and there she encounters the colourful array of stereotypes that they have, notably bitch woman. And we're not even giving these people the benefit of their screen names. Okay, we've got nerd girl, stoner guy, bitch woman. That's pretty much it. Now they're the important ones. And you've got Nerd Girl is interested in Stoner Guy, who's interested in Hot Horny Girl. Bitch Woman is interested in Doofus, who's interested in Telekinetic Girl Tina. She's the only one whose name matters because she's really the only one that has any fucking personality in this whole goddamn film, with the exception of the Doctor and her mother, maybe. And Jason, of course, because, you know, Jason Voorhees. Now, this is the beginnings of where all these people are going to start getting hacked up, of course. Bitch Woman does some shit, Tina gets upset, Tina goes back, Doofus is like, whoa, what the fuck? And yeah, everyone then starts to break away. Hot Nerd Girl is interested in Stoner Guy, makes some comment about it. Other girl who's there is basically like, look, you ain't his type, you need a makeover. She goes and gets herself a makeover, by the way, and she looked a lot more attractive before she had it, because it was before the 80s hair kicked in. I'm very sorry about that to the actress, but you know, you're beautiful, but yeah, whoever thought you looked better after the makeover was wrong. But anyway, moving along. Jason by this point has turned up. Now I'm not going to go through this kill by kill. If that's something you want, guys, ain't the channel. We're going to discuss the basic plot beats. The individual deaths don't really matter. He starts to hack his way through them as they break off and do stupid shit like go off into the woods, they go skinny dipping, guy gets hit with an axe, and then Jason does something that is often spoken about in these films. He kind of started doing it in the last movie, and he proper fucking does it in the next few, and that is teleports. Now I got to assume that he's some kind of, you know, mythical being himself or supernatural entity, because he teleports. He doesn't just find his way somewhere. He doesn't walk there. And there's the whole thing where, you know, he's walking at someone and they're running. Now I know they're idiots and they often fall over, which is another stupid shit. You always think, right, I have no sympathy for you. You get off your feet. And it's like, run. He shouldn't be able to catch you. He's slowly walking through the woods. There's no fucking way this bastard can actually catch you unless he's teleporting. And in this instance, he seems to teleport. He doesn't go into the water. He suddenly rises out of the water for the skinny dipping girl, ducks back under, and he drags her under and drowns. This film, I should also, just as a side note to these movies, as they have a lot of nudity and sex and violence and blood in them, the MPAA and BBFC, respectively, within America and Great Britain, had a lot of umbrage with these movies to take. In America, the MPAA would often make them cut down scenes to reduce the blood and gore. They'd sometimes go as far as to even make them completely redo a scene because it was too violent, too bloody, too graphic, and they didn't want anything to do with it. The BBFC, living up to the prudish reputation of the Brits, was like, nah, you can't have so many titties in this thing, you gotta remove the titties. And the girl, for example, skinny dipping in the water about to boink her boyfriend because she's dragged underwater and is a full frontal nudity shot, the BBFC made them remove it. I think it's like 7 or 8 seconds worth of footage. It's nothing really. It has been restored since then. They've changed their minds as sensibilities have evolved over time. In the early 2000s they did change their minds on it, but it was something to note that these films actually were massively cut, and it's often better, if you can, to get the unrated versions or director's cuts of these films, because they're often a lot better. And you know, if you like bloody kills and titties, then you're going to get that in those versions, not in these. So basically we've got that. He kills this girl, he kills the guy on the beach, you want to call it a beach, and he moves on to killing more. Now, skip forward a little bit, we got Nerdy Girl who, you know, went under a makeover and then for some reason goes looking for the guy she really wants to boink, and she goes walking out into the woods, starts finding bodies and gets herself killed. And then again we move on. You've got Stoner Guy boinking Hot Nerd Girl, not Hot Nerd Girl, she wishes, Hot Horny Girl. You've got Bitch Woman about to boink another guy who she then tells him basically, look, you do nothing for me, I want the doofus to screw me, not you, I'm not interested, fuck off. He goes downstairs, even though she thought he was going to stay there and cuddle her and be insulted some more. Stoner Guy finishes boinking Horny Girl, goes for something to eat, gets himself killed in the kitchen when Jason turns up. Then other useless guy who didn't get laid gets killed, etc, etc. You can see where this is going. Hot Girl runs into Jason, she gets thrown out of a window, Jason teleports out into the woods at some point, and at this point Tina, who has discovered that the Doctor wants to recommit her because her mother has just discovered that he's actually screwing with her all this time. He's no intention of helping her. He's not trying to cure her. He's just trying to understand her telekinetic abilities, gets in the car, drives away, but starts to have hallucinations of Jason killing her mother. So whether these are precognitive or just hallucinations, because she is a bit batshit crazy, not entirely sure. She crashes the car. The doctor and her mother come looking for her, find the crashed car. She's got out and fucked off. They go looking for her in the woods. The doctor, actually, for the only reasonable thing he ever says in this movie, he's trying to say maybe she's come back to the house. Let's go. Don't go running around the woods. They need to go round and around the woods instead. They run into Jason, and then he proves just how much of a dickhead he actually is, and he uses Tina's mother as a human shield while Jason guts her, and he escapes. He runs into Tina. Tina sees him covered in blood. He stutters a bit when she asks him what the fuck's happened to her mother. She sees right through the transparent son of a bitch, and she runs the fuck off. He then runs into Jason again, who has somehow found what I think is some kind of tree pruning device with a big circular saw on the end of it. Where the fuck he got it, don't know. He got it though. Gave up on his machete. He was pretty fucking determined to kill the doctor with it. The doctor goes running but keeps falling over like a fucking pillock, and then thinks he's lost Jason because Jason's slowly walking behind him, but then Jason fucking teleports next to him. The doctor then falls on his back but doesn't try and get up or run away or even crawl away, just sort of wriggles on his back while Jason restarts the goddamn machine, and then Jason guts him with that. Kind of poetic. He's probably one of the most satisfying deaths in the films. I wish it was a little more graphic, to be honest, but it's one of the instances where I think it was actually cut again, like many of the deaths in these movies. Moving along, Tina finds her mother dead. She gets back to the house. She finds Doofus. He manages to find a gun. When they're looking through the doctor's stuff, they find Bitch Woman. She's the only other person left alive. She doesn't think any of this is true. She thinks that Tina's probably the killer. She tells them both to fuck off. She tries to get Doofus to go upstairs and fuck her, even though they've literally found their friends dead. That's why she is Bitch Woman. She's not just nasty, she's a fucking psychopath. Anyway, she refuses, opens the door, there's Jason. Hello Jason, die. So she gets an axe to the head and thrown over the TV. They then basically end up in a fight. She then starts to use her telekinetic powers. The boyfriend, Doofus-ish character, gets thrown to one side. She uses her telekinetic powers to break his mask, and we see the ugliest fucking incarnation of Jason Voorhees we ever see. After a load of weird goo sort of oozes out of his head, she then nearly strangles him with a cord, drops him through the floor. They take the fight outside ultimately, and she uses her psychic abilities again and again and again. She's already had a couple of fights with him at this point where she like electrocuted him, which didn't seem to work, because that never seems to work. It always seems to slow him down though. Jason, electricity and water don't seem to mix too well. But he gets away, chases her down to the beach, and I keep calling it a beach. It ain't a fucking beach, it's a wharf at best. And then she ends up in a bit more of a fight with him, but Jason is Jason, so she ain't fucking winning. She uses her powers again to ask for help, and this time, for some reason, her dad's not decomposed body of her being in the water for 10 years rises up, strangles Jason with a chain, and drags him underwater, where he will remain, apparently forever. The authorities turn up. They end up going in an ambulance and like, we won, we beat him. And there's actually two survivors. There's a final guy, Doofus, and a final girl in the form of Tina. So I'm missing out a couple of plot beats in this. As I said, to really get an experience of watching this, I encourage you to go watch it yourself and not just listen to my inane opinions. It is a good movie. It's a bit all over the place with its characters. There's a couple of random deaths and a few other sex scenes, which the other films have been lacking actually up to this point. There haven't been a lot of sex in the last movie and stuff. This film returns to that. I should also point out, according to allegedly, that the return of the cocaine and general drug abuse behind the scenes had also returned for this movie, but that is allegedly. I can't confirm that. It's just rumors and reports. But all things considered, it's an enjoyable film. As I said, to me, being self-aware, not breaking the fourth wall self-aware, but is self-aware enough to know this is what we are as a Jason movie, as a Friday the 13th film. This is who and what we are. It introduces Kane Hodder, which for me automatically makes it fucking amazing, because Kane Hodder's interpretation is considered the definitive version of Jason, the big hulking zombie of a creature with his heavy breathing, which is the infamous scene where he beats someone to death, where he kills a woman in a sleeping bag, stuff like that. You've got a lot of obligatory deaths. As I said, there's a few plot beats I basically missed out, but you understand that I think the basic summary of the movie with this. And Jason also partakes in the usual weird little habit of staging bodies, which if you've never noticed in the Jason movies, he does more often than you realise. He likes to he doesn't just leave them where he kills them, he cleans up after himself. He's not Michael Myers, although he does that a bit as well. He basically moves them about. Maybe he teleports them. Maybe. So, with that said, this video is dragging on a little bit now, so we're going to jump forward to my favourite bit where I get to rank this movie. And I'm going to give it a 5 out of 6, and I know that's probably a higher score than people would know you might award this movie, because it isn't the best film. I know it isn't the best film. It has its problems. The characters, as I said, the characterizations are piss poor. With the exception of Tina, who's actually a pretty decent character, and is poorly developed, the others are literally one note. Like Bitch Woman, there's literally nothing else to her. And you've got Nerd Girl. She's the epitome of 1980s. She's actually really hot, and she doesn't realize that all she needs is her hair, doing a bit of makeup, and take those glasses off, and suddenly she's beautiful. Fucking ridiculous. She didn't need to do that for a start, but that's the 80s for you. But she's literally all these things, and these characters don't naturally, to me, sit together. A stoner doesn't hang around with basically what must have been the cheerleader and maybe the nerd girl and other horny teenagers. That's not who the stoners I hung around with, allegedly stoners, back when I was in college, and I don't even think they knew what a woman was. So no, but I'm going to give it 5 out of 6 because although it's not original, it's not groundbreaking, it does try new things. It does end the same way though as the last movie, where Jason basically chained up under the fucking lake again. And it introduces the elements like the Jason teleport. Well, it didn't introduce those, but it seems to play on them a lot more. It broadens the universe to expand to other things, to basically be the baby steps towards what is almost a shared connective universe of the Jason and other horror movies. For example, there are tenuous connections to, obviously, Freddy. That's an obvious one. There are even tenuous connections to the Evil Dead franchise, but we'll cover that in later installments of this series. For now, we're going to end this with, it's a 5 out of 6. It ain't the best, it ain't the worst. Certainly none of them match up to the first movie. In my opinion, that's always going to probably be the best out of Friday the 13th offerings. They have to try really hard to beat it anyway. There's a few come close though, and I like this one simply because they tried something different, but they also became self-aware enough to know that they didn't need to be overly complicated with characters that they were basically going to bash their heads in with an axe. Now that seems counterintuitive to making a good movie, but actually, to me, at least with these films, it isn't. It actually works for these films. You don't want them overly complicated. If you overcomplicate them, Jason's an idiot. He'd be fairly easy to defeat if you don't actually factor in that he can teleport, and he seems to be immortal. But pretty much, you stay away from the lake, he stays away from you. So there's stuff to think about. Either way, that's it for this episode. There will be part 8 coming, which is Friday the 13th, part 8. Jason Takes Manhattan. An interesting film. We'll get to it in the next episode. I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.